Hello, I'm Mishka, and this channel is the Helsinki Renaissance, where I will hopefully be doing Renaissance man-like things. And one of those hopeful attempts right now is talking about the movies of Markku Lehmuskallio. If I could just manage to get out of some William Shatner-esque mode in this introduction. And I'm sure I am, because I already did it. No more abrupt pauses, I promise. So anyway, the reason why I am doing this video about the movies of Markku Lehmuskallio, and I'll say the movies of Markku Lehmuskallio rather than the movies of Markku Lehmuskallio and Anastasia Lapsui, because I didn't really research the biographical side of things, but I think that at the beginning of his career, Markku Lehmuskallio was the sole credited director in his movies, and then in his latter, in the latter half of his career, he co-directed the movies with Anastasia Lapsui. But anyway, because I talk about the early stuff more, because the early stuff is there, I'll just say Markku Lehmuskallio for short. But anyway, the reason why I'm doing this video is because I happened to see a French YouTube channel that was talking about, I think that channel just showed clips of Markku Lehmuskallio and Anastasia Lapsui movies. And out of all of the directors in Finnish cinema, I think that Markku Lehmuskallio is probably the one that I would most expect to become big in France. Because the Erik Bloomberg movie, Valkoinen peura, The White Deer, for instance, it's that movie is very popular in France, and as I've been researching Finnish cinema for the last several months, I've come to the conclusion that that Lapland-themed movies to Finland seem like what westerns are to America. So the kind of frontier life movies, how they have some sort of a mystique about them that it's difficult to talk about them in that they just seem somehow significant, even when they are doing some fairly standard tropes. In that in several westerns, it just seems like there's just some kind of grandeur to them in American cinema. Like it almost manages to reach the condition of the kind of epic poetry. And I just started thinking of Lapland-related movies as like Finland's frontier films. So there are all kinds of movies set in Lapland. Some of them are about some pioneer stuff, like Åke Lindman's Lapin kullan kimallus, which is about a gold rush that was set in Lapland. And then there are some Lapland-related comedies by Arne Tarkas, such as Villin Pohjolan kulta, which again something about people searching for gold up north. Then there are some like half action film dramas like Mosku, Sukunsa Viimeinen, directed by Tapio Suominen and written by Olli Soinio, which has a bit of that Lapland mystique about it. Then there are the Rauni Mulberg movies like Maan syntinen laulu, The Earth is a Song of Sin. Set in Lapland, very famously, more of a revisionist type movie. Then the Erik Blomberg White Deer, the Jack Vitikka sort of proto White Deer type movie, Aila Pohjolan tytär. Also set in Lapland, William Marcus movie, Lumisten metsien tyttö, The Girl of the Snow-Covered Forests is a literal translation. Also much about Lapland mystique, some, another comedy in the Pekka ja Pätkä series, sort of, I guess, parodying the Lapland mystique. And there is some kind of a primal quality in a lot of those Lapland-related movies. So there's like a wild spectrum of tonal qualities to those movies, like very serious people in Finland certainly wouldn't want to talk about Pekka ja Pätkä movies when they are talking about Finnish cinema, recommended for French people. But I'm not making any qualitative calls about those movies. It's just that I've noticed it with those movies, with Valentin Vaalas, Tunturien tyttö, Maaret Tunturien tyttö, set in Lapland as well. Like I've noticed it watching those movies is that there is some sort of a constant fascination with how it is that movies in those landscape play out. So regardless of what the merits of the dramaturgy are in those different movies that I named, I do believe that lots of foreigners would be more into those movies than the average Finnish person would be, because there is just some sort of a mystique going on. These Markku Lehmuskallio movies, not all of them are set in Finland. So I would say that the reason why I'm talking about Lapland in relation with Markku Lehmuskallio is that even if some of these movies are set elsewhere, they have a sort of a roughly comparable milieu in that people say that the Sami people at Lapland, that they are Europe's last indigenous people whose ancestry would predate the Indo-European arrival. So that in is it northwestern Russia and then northern Finland, Sweden, Norway, there would be some people who would have a culture that has a heritage that is not of the Indo-European stock, and it is definitely an interesting subject that Markku Lehmuskallio to some extent has covered for most of his career, and I do believe that it is the kind of subject matter that has massive international potential. And again, if there would be one Finnish filmmaker who I would imagine would sort of effortlessly gain fans in France, for example, Markku Lehmuskallio would probably be the artist that I would submit, and that's that's sort of a lengthy introduction as to why I'm doing this video. And another much quicker reason is because I've also been doing lots of other videos about Finnish cinema for this channel. So since I have a bunch of Markku Lehmuskallio related titles out from the library, which I checked out as I was doing preparation for my top 100 of my personal list of my 100 favorite Finnish movies. There will be 2 Lehmuskallio movies featured on that list. And a third, or you could say that there were 2 movies that were just sort of on the outside looking in, that if it would be 125, top 125 rather than top 100, it might have 4 Lehmuskallio movies, but well, 2 is pretty good, and that's why I have this here. And since I might as well do a quick I don't know if I want to call these reviews, let's call them overviews of the different movies, since I do realize that a lot of these movies are so hyper obscure that most people won't have these be available. So if there are people who would have some sort of an interest in Markku Lehmuskallio's career but don't know what is good and what the movies are like, perhaps that's why I might do this video. But unfortunately, the thing is that I don't know how close my own tastes are with the tastes of the audience. So just because I didn't think that something was a big deal doesn't necessarily mean that a hypothetical French viewer mightn't think that something is a big deal. So this first movie called Korpinpolska, it's difficult thinking how it is that let's say a hypothetical French viewer would feel about Korpinpolska. So this is an 80-minute movie, and I think it's filed as the first feature-length movie after a couple of documentary shorts by Lehmuskallio. So this is from 1980, and I'd say that the title of Korpinpolska, it sounds like some sort of a really antiquated Finnish expression. It refers to some sort of a dance that is tied with old world beliefs. So anyway, how this movie begins is that there is something like from 10 to 20 minutes of nature shots. So that it's as if there is some sort of a slow overture to the movie where there isn't any kind of obvious plot, but it's almost as if there is like some sort of something that's almost like a dance of the images where it's very easy to see that Lehmuskallio had some sort of a background in documentary shorts, because how this movie begins is almost like a documentary short. And it's strange to say that I thought that completely silent or plotless beginning to me seemed like the best thing about the movie, is that it was even on this VHS. It was, absolutely gorgeous to look at, so that it wouldn't surprise me if some French audiences, for example, would rate this very highly. But I do have to say that as the movie transitioned into like halfway almost having something like a plot, I just thought that it started becoming really trivial. So, I mean, it is part of the MO of Markku Lehmuskallio is that he makes fictional films or films that technically have a dramaturgy, but they feel like they are documentaries. So there are some traditional aspects of really old Finnish rural life that it's the kind of a dying tradition that Lehmuskallio seems to want to preserve. But anyway, I mean, it has some musical sequences, and this just feels like after the nature shots at the beginning, it just feels almost like some sort of an installation that some sort of a museum might have, like some sort of a demo reel of some bygone era. Like as a feature film, I don't know what to say about Korpinpolska. Like it started out, I thought, relatively strong, but I just ended up not really caring about the movie, which is why I wanted to preface this, is that just because I didn't care about the movie doesn't mean that someone else mightn't care about it. But yeah, I mean, this is a very minimalistic movie which gains a kind of a grandeur because of the nature shots, but I can't in all honesty really recommend a movie like that, but I want to qualify that by saying with the rather extended intro that this video had, in that if there is some sort of a mystique about this, the mystique can definitely play to some audiences somewhere, but I think that Finnish audiences probably might be rather frustrated by Korpinpolska, and yeah, I don't know how much to say about it, but this definitely feels like Lehmuskallio's standard mode, in that it is like some sort of a documentary narrative hybrid, where it almost seems like it is some sort of a tone poem of a work. And basically, when this is more obviously a tone poem of just showing nature, like some shots of a moose breathing in the mist. I think there was literally a shot of that. It is quite exquisite in its own way, but then the kind of museum piece stuff, I didn't really know what to do with it. So I would say that Korpinpolska, like, I mean, stylistically, this is probably the movie that best illustrates what Markku Lehmuskallio is all about. But I do have to say that I don't consider this among the best movies that he has, so I mean, I don't feel like panning it, but for honesty's sake, I have to say that the more the film went on, the more disappointed I got. So the beginning was definitely promising, but then I just thought that it's just sort of well, in my video called I review 3 rarities from second run DVD, I frequently complained that those movies, they felt like short films that got stretched out so that they could be sold as feature films, but that they had material for a short film. I think Korpinpolska is definitely that kind of a movie. I mean, if some of you know what type of aesthetic second run DVDs have, it almost wouldn't surprise me if second run actually did release some Markku Lehmuskallio movies. But anyway, this is definitely part of that kind of cinema where something that basically has the content of a short film is just stretched out. So what should be maybe two different, perhaps this is like two different 20-minute short films added together under some pretext and then just stretched out to be twice the length that it should be. And I ended up perhaps, this made it difficult for me to enjoy it, but it had something going for it, which is why I don't want to pan it, but I definitely want to, it's just, I don't want to automatically say that, everything Markku Lehmuskallio has done is a hidden gem, everyone needs to watch them. Is that, some of them are hidden gems and some of them might really earn some international fans, but not all of them are magical gold falling from the heavens. But it is what it is. It has its moments, but I would say that it's a minor work. And then the next film, Scary, Vaivaiskoivujen maa. I feel really weird saying Scary, Vaivaiskoivujen maa. It almost sounds like some sort of it almost sounds like I'm singing saying that. This is rather like Korpinpolska in that this most, should I try to translate what Scary Vaivaiskoivujen maa means? So koivu refers to the birch tree, and vaivaiskoivu is some sort of a specific birch tree, but I definitely don't know how to translate that in English, and I'm not alone in that. That is rather a specialist word, which I just unfortunately don't know. But Scary, I think, is some sort of a Sami word for the specific type of birch trees. But as I was saying, this is very much in that Korpinpolska vein. By the way, if you're surprised why it is that I have these on VHS tapes, it's because these aren't, to the best of my knowledge, available on DVD. So I have to watch them on VHS. But anyway, this feels like very much in the same vein as Korpinpolska, as some sort of a narrative documentary hybrid, but this definitely really felt like a documentary, and just sort of going there to observe the sort of real everyday life of the people of Lapland. So that, even though I think that it was basically, an acted, technically a fictional film movie, but it has the feel of a documentary. And it seemed like a rather aimless movie, in that they were just, how should I put it? It seemed like a movie where the only connective element between the different moments was the geographical position of everything being set in Lapland. So it was like standard, unglamorous, unexotic moments of people of Lapland just going through their everyday life. So this is definitely naturalism as a genre, and I didn't really get any kind of a sense of direction with the story. It was just sort of naturalism walking in circles. And out of all of these movies that I have with me, I have to say that I liked Scary the least. But I guess I could see that if somebody liked Lapland just because, like if someone had some sort of a special interest in Lapland, I could see somebody being interested in Skierri, but the aimlessness of it, the kind of how should I put it? Like it seemed like Mr. Lehmuskallio was trying to go out of his way to just find some way to be uninspired in the kind of naturalism. It's just I thought that this was an elusive movie to a fault, and I was not engaged watching this at all. But like, if some people had an interest in Lapland, if they would have an interest in a documentary about Lapland, about the kind of lives that people are leading, I could see some people having an interest in it, but it's the opposite of a dynamic movie. So it's for very patient people, let's say. And Korpinpolska, again, it's for very patient people with potentially some, what do they call it, anthropological leanings or something? I don't know. But yeah, not really for, not necessarily for standard aesthetes, in that these are movies that will play to a very specific audience. And just like, the Cinémathèque crowd in France, they are very much into Jean-Marie Straub and Daniel Villet. And I think that Markku Lehmuskallio and Anastasia Lapsui, I think that they are sort of Finland's answer to Straub and Villet. So, make of that what you will. But just like with some of those Cinémathèque favorites like Straub and Villet, Jean Rouge, and Philippe Garel, just like those play to a really specific kind of a film buff. I think Lehmuskallio also plays to that very specific crowd. The next film that I have, Korpinpolska was from 1980, Skierri was from 82, and this movie called Sininen Imettäjä is from 1985. So a couple of years between these projects. And Sininen Imettäjä, watching this, I was slightly reminded of Victor Erithe's, what do they call it? Something like Queen's Tree and the Sun, or something like that. That Erithe movie about a painter. I really can't remember the name of the movie, but he has such a manageable sized filmography that it won't be very difficult to track it down. But anyway, just pacing wise, and as far as the tonality is concerned, the way that some people are fans of Victor Erithe, El Sur and Spirit of the Beehive are sort of bigger classics, but Sininen Imettäjä is perhaps the most Victor Erithe-esque of these Lehmuskallio movies, and this is a movie about a painter, and I have to say that I do quite like this movie. It's perhaps the Lehmuskallio movie that might be the easiest to recommend to kind of standard film buffs. So it is a story about a painter discover cover art is well, I guess it's some sort of a vista to the art that the main character is doing. There is some sort of a panel with these photographs. The title Sininen Imettäjä, I think that it's referring to a particular frame in the story where Sininen is Finnish for blue, and Imettäjä is referring to suckling. And there is some sort of a picture. I think there was a sheep in the frame, or they are in rural areas, so there are occasional animals in the frame. But anyway, the tonal qualities of this movie are probably best explained when you explain how it is that the film derived its slightly opaque title. So that Sininen Imettäjä, you could translate it, I don't know what the international English translation is, but you could translate it as a sheep suckling in blue, or something like that. So the way that that title is quite opaque, the tonal values in this movie are also quite opaque. But so if this reminded me of a certain old Spanish movie, and I think it's from the 80s or 90s, probably 90s actually, but Queen's Tree of the Sun, I think it was called. This also slightly reminded me of Maurice Pialat's Van Gogh movie. Do I have to say Van Gogh? I already felt slightly strange by saying everything. But the Pialat movie is also rather like that. But anyway, the main character is a painter. It says at the back cover that this movie is an attempt at allowing you to experience the world the way that the painter is experiencing it. This film definitely is very successful in allowing you to do it. The painter is deaf, so how it is that is sort of slightly restricting him from the others around him. This movie is very well depicting that kind of situation. That was it John Donne who says that no man is an island? But it's as if Joel manages to occasionally be kind of a peninsula that, depending on the tide, he's either accessible or not accessible to others around him. And that, the drama in this movie is rather limited, but it has a very interesting way of going about its business. But anyway, if there are some people who are fans of the Maurice Pialat, Vincent van Gogh movie, and who are fans of the Victor Erithe movie, I think that this could definitely be a bit of a hidden gem for those people. But anyway, it's definitely more of a narrative effort from Lehmuskallio compared to those kind of documentary narrative hybrids. So this is just kind of like all narrative. So in some ways it's the most normal art house movie that Lehmuskallio has done to that extent. I would basically recommend it to international audiences. I'm not, I mean, I'm really on the fence whether to recommend Korpinpolska or Skierri, but and I feel bad for recommending this more than those, because in some ways this is a more typical movie, and perhaps some would appreciate the atypical aspects in Korpinpolska, but I just know that this would definitely play better to quite a few audience members. So, you know, Sininen Imettäjä, even though I might make it sound opaque, it is definitely the most accessible of those movies. Although, I don't know, but in those more not nature-related movies, I don't know what about them is accessible. Maybe they are just somehow limited in their narrative moves, which frustrates some restless souls. But anyway, Sininen Imettäjä, I think it's just this side of being like a minor hidden gem in the history of Finnish cinema. Now, the next film by Lehmuskallio from 1988 called Inuksuk. Inuksuk is a movie set in I can't remember what the specific location is, but it's some sort of an extreme northern point in Europe. So there is some sort of a, you know, if John Carpenter's The Thing was set in some sort of an extreme point in the south, in Antarctica, this is like some sort of a comparable isolated station somewhere in the north. I can't entirely get the specific location right now, but you might, if you know something about Lehmuskallio, you might be wondering why this time I'm talking about John Carpenter movies. Well, you know, Inuksuk isn't necessarily like a John Carpenter movie. To the best of my knowledge, no Lehmuskallio movies like John Carpenter, but Inuksuk isn't so far away. You know, if I said that Sininen Imettäjä was like the closest Lehmuskallio gets to a standard art house movie, this almost is so accessible as sort of being simply a narrative movie, is that to me this feels almost like not even an art house movie, but almost like a mainstream movie. Is that I was surprised when watching Inuksuk that you know, this, like, Inuksuk really isn't more obscure than something like William Marcus's Lumisten metsien tyttö or Valentin Vaalas Maarit Tunturin tyttö. So those are completely standard mainstream movies from Finland's past, and this feels way more accessible than it is. So, you know, and it has like some sort of a strange Western edge to it. Like, it's difficult to talk about it, but this does almost have a vibe that is a bit like a Western. And yet, there's two scientists, or I don't know whether you say two scientists or three scientists. So, there's two. Wait, no, you can even say Western scientists. I think that how it is that like, was there a Finnish man, a Russian woman, and then some sort of a person of some from, I don't know what term to use, from some non-Indo-European culture, so that the way that because Christopher Columbus because he thought that when he found America, he thought that he found India, and then because no one was able to correct him, he just called the native people the Indians, even though, you know, they weren't in India. So the way that in Westerns some people call the Native Americans Indians, some people in Europe were also given to referring to some of the indigenous population that would have been there, like in Alaska or something, as being Indians, but yeah, because there is an actual country called India which has Indians in there who are like actually Indians, which is what Columbus was trying to find. It's kind of like making it rather awkward, like trying to have some sort of an all-purpose word for it. But anyway, like if I mentioned that you know, this kind of northwestern Russia and then the Lapland of Finland, Sweden, Norway, like whatever would be like the Indian equivalent of that part, one such gentleman was in this movie, which I'm finding it almost impossible to find the correct terminology, because I just was the gentleman an Inuit? I really can't find the precise description here. But anyway, just some person who was like the Tonto to the main character's Lone Ranger or something. So if you think that that's too broad a description, this is actually a far broader movie as far as its tonality is concerned. That like this isn't necessarily that far from some Lone Ranger type storytelling. But anyway, there's 3 men in an Arctic location, and yeah, it's a more mainstream a story than what it might appear if a person is familiar with the other Lehmuskallio movies. Like I actually think that if a movie like Inuksuk got a major release, I think that this could have become one of the surprise hits of Finnish cinema. I think that this has some definite crossover potential, so that the way that sometimes European movies, they can become like minor hits in America. You know, was the Japanese movie Shall We Dance? Because they had like clever marketing with that movie, in that lots of people didn't realize there was a Japanese movie because the poster just had the title Shall We Dance and something about ballroom dancing, and then like only had like the legs of the character or something. Lots of Americans bought a ticket to it, perhaps not realizing there was a foreign movie. So the way that Shall We Dance sort of cheated its way into becoming one of the biggest foreign films of all time with the American audiences, like I think that there would have been a way to sell Inuksuk to the American film buyers, and perhaps they might have liked it in that the kind of rather contained drama that is there with this this is a perfectly accessible movie, and this was my second favorite out of all of these Lehmuskallio films. I thought it was excellent, and yeah, because I think that this is so recommendable to normal people, I think that conversely some of the Cinematheque audience might shun it slightly. But I just thought that this was an absolutely delightful movie, and bewilderingly enough, not necessarily so worlds apart from John Carpenter. There's only one death in the movie, and some kind of slightly shamanistic mystique sort of somewhere in there, and then one character possibly going crazy and whatever. So like slightly more, you know, like if John Carpenter's The Thing is for, you know, people with band t-shirts, this might be for people who wear cardigans, the marketing. So, you know, make of that what you will. But that's how I'm reviewing Inuksuk, and I absolutely love this movie. So it was one of those surprise finds. Then Lehmuskallio is having a couple of documentaries in a row that I haven't seen. And then if we go from 1988 to 1998, there's a documentary called Uhri, Elokuva Metsästä, which I have seen. And I feel bad about panning a movie, but anyway, I just want to say it for the record that the reason why I'm not overtly interested in finding a maximum amount of those Lehmuskallio documentaries is because I thought that Uhri, Uhri is a noun for a sacrificial entity. So, and then Elokuva Metsästä means a movie about the forest. Anyway, the only reason why I want to mention Uhri is because I thought it was a really uninteresting work. It was like a worse version of Scary in that it just felt like it was sort of B-roll, where like, you know, when sometimes on DVD extras you have like, you know, stuff shot on location and just like unengaging random moments just unfolding. I thought that Uhri Elokuva Metsästä was like that, and I just, because of that, I don't know how much one can expect from some of those you know, purely documentaries that Markku Lehmuskallio has done. So you know, even though as an old school film buff, I am a bit of a completist, and I sort of feel like watching all of the movies from directors that I consider high profile, and I certainly do consider Markku Lehmuskallio that. But I just don't know how much to expect from those documentaries. Like, I was very disappointed with that particular movie. Now, the next movie that Lehmuskallio did, called Seitsemän laulua tunralta, I couldn't get it from the library because the VHS was sort of, it's probably sitting on the shelves waiting to be repaired on some library-related workshop, so I can't review it for the purpose of this video. But Seitsemän laulua tunralta is one of those movies that Lehmuskallio is most famous for in Finland. So I feel like I have seen that movie a really long time ago when I was a very young person. I have the vaguest memory of having seen it, but I can't really talk about it at all except saying that it is among the movies that Lehmuskallio is most famous for here in Finland. But I just have to jump over it because I can't really say anything too meaningful about it right this minute. But anyway, if we jump forward to 2004, there's a movie called Jumalan Morsian, which is built as directed by Anastasia Lapsu and Markku Lehmuskallio. So Jumalan Morsian, I've seen this translated as Bride of the Seventh Heaven. And at the back cover, it says that Anastasia Lapsui, apparently in her youth, she was friends with an older woman living nearby who used to tell her about some anecdotes about her youth. And this movie apparently is based on those anecdotes. So, you know, this is definitely the kind of movie where, like, you know, John Ford in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance has the kind of line of, when legend becomes fact, you print the legend. So this is well, let's just say that this movie has the legend printed. So I don't know to what extent you can say that it's based on a true story or whatever, but I think in the best sense of the word, it is based on a true story. So that it's based on a story that was related to Anastasia Lapso at least. But anyway, I thought that this was overwhelmingly the greatest work that Markku Lehmuskallio has ever done. Like, to me, this is the undisputed career high. And, like, I mean, I think that if I said that Sininen Imettäjä could be like a standard art house movie, Inuksuk could almost be like a standard mainstream movie, I think that this is like some sort of a situation where this is no longer a standard of anything. I think this is like a special sample of an art house movie that could be so approachable that it could sort of have crossover potential because of the mystique of the setting. I think that this is a movie that could really reach people all over the world. I don't want to talk too much about the plot, but I just want to say that I just thought that this was the clear career high for Markku Lehmuskallio. I absolutely loved the movie. And it's strange, I didn't remember, like, when I was watching this, I was able to recall several scenes, having seen them in my youth, sort of roughly when this movie came out. But I didn't remember loving this as much then. But definitely when I was watching it now, I just thought that this was an absolute pitch perfect movie. Like, that there was nothing wrong about it. It was just an odd, quirky ball of perfection there. I thought it was endearing, visually stunning, sort of, mysteriously delightful. Like, I would recommend this to anyone and everyone. I thought it was, just a brilliant movie. And, let's see. Yes, then we have to jump from 2004 to 2010. So in 2010, I don't have that DVD with me because I was able to see that movie recently on DVD called Sukunsa Viimeinen. So Sukunsa Viimeinen, you could literally translate it as something like the last in line. So Sukunsa Viimeinen, it was seemingly a return for those kinds of documentary narrative hybrid roots of Markku Lehmuskallio, and it seemed like some sort of a comparable work to this Bride of the Seventh Heaven, in that Sukunsa Viimeinen was the kind of situation that early on in the movie there was a character, like there was some sort of some sort of a way of life of some people, I think, living in Russia, showed in their, trying to hold on to their original ways, and then, this talk about how during the Soviet Union the Russians tried to get people to abandon the non-Russian ways of life, and then people caught between contrary pools of tradition versus, I guess, globalization or well, whatever you call it, but like a call to conform to the kind of standard Russian ways. And I have to say that I thought that Sukunsa Viimeinen was like kind of like a less interesting variation of basically the same themes in this movie. So that if there were two different time levels to this, the old woman narrating her tale to a young girl, and then the tale sort of acted out. I thought that the two timelines worked almost perfectly in The Bride of the Seventh Heaven, and I wasn't particularly engaged by Sukunsa Viimeinen, so I'd have to say that I wouldn't particularly recommend that movie, because I just think that this movie does everything that Sukunsa Viimeinen does better, and that the only additional word that Sukunsa Viimeinen might have for some people is purely political. So that if some people think that there is some sort of a fight against imperialism or something in Sukunsa Viimeinen, some people might like it on a political level, but just on a purely aesthetic level, I don't think that it's a particularly engaging work. And then here is the last movie that I have seen from 2015 called Tsamo. I just rewatched it yesterday for the sake of doing this video, and I have to say that this reminded me quite a lot of François Truffaut's L'Enfant Sauvage, except minus the Vivaldi. So that the way that the reason why I mentioned earlier in this video sort of native people in Alaska being called Indians is because I just watched this, and Tsamo would be one of those native people from Alaska who, because Alaska used to be part of Russia before the Russians sold it to United States. So there is some sort of there was a period when Finland was part of the Tsarist Russia, Finland was colonized by Russia, and Alaska was colonized by Russia simultaneously. And I think that this film is set in the same time when Finland and Alaska technically belong to the same country. Which was, it was a long time ago. And Tsamo comes from Alaska to Finland, and she doesn't really fit in. And she... the way that Sukunsa Viimeinen was about this kind of whether to conform under pressure or whether to hold on to some traditional ways of life. Tsamo is very much about that. So if Truffaut's L'Enfant Sauvage was about, it was set in the 18th century, but there was this kind of a juxtaposition of very formal, quote, civilized, unquote, life, and then the kind of more, Rousseauian way of life that people outside European civilization, how those two things clashed. Like Truffaut had the kind of conforming to civilization. Truffaut saw it in some kind of Truffaut saw it in some softer light. Whereas in Tsamo, it's almost depicted a bit like, sort of like halfway violently. So that the way that George Bernard Shaw in his book Mallion, he thought that Professor Higgins was almost being a bully to Eliza Doolittle. Tsamo is almost like sort of condemning that type of behavior. But anyway, stylistically, the period setting definitely, I think, makes this look a bit like Truffaut's L'Enfant Sauvage. So if you like that movie, you might like this. But, I sort of liked it. I think this is like good second tier work by Lehmuskallion lapsuus. But anyway, because I want to keep this video under an hour, I have to wrap this up now. So those were all my thoughts of the Lehmuskallion lapsuus movie that I've been able to see. If you like this video, I hope you like some other videos as well. But anyway, that's all from me for now. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.